Here we go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leela Harris, and I'm here with Neerava Nash and Kindi Dulai-Gill, and we're Dalian Method facilitators, and this is episode 3. And today's theme is other people's suffering. And yeah, who wants to start? This is a really big one. So
yeah, you just froze a bit there, Leela. So
I did?
I missed a little bit of what you just said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was just saying that our theme today on episode 3 is other people's suffering. Okay, and that's our theme.
Okay.
Am I coming through okay now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
If it glitches a little bit, I notice it usually calms down after a while. So, yeah. So, yeah, do one of you guys want to start?
I'd like to say something about it in the fact that we tend to get nervous about suffering, but it's really, really important. Because I know for myself that had I not suffered quite as intensely as I did, I definitely wouldn't be where I am now. And I certainly wouldn't be sitting here talking to the two of you, because I wouldn't even have found the Dalian Method, let alone then get trained in it. So, just to start, I just want to make reference to the fact that suffering has a very important role in our own evolution. And it almost seems to be a necessary part for many of us to help progress us towards what's going to make us the most happiest and what's going to help us to live closer to our own calling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to add that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's like we need that suffering. Often that analogy is used of to make the diamond, we need the pressure.
Yeah.
All that pressure,
Yeah.
the pressure or the suffering is what helps us become that beautiful diamond that we all are inside.
Yeah.
We can't find it without the suffering. We can't find it without the contrasts that life brings.
And some of those great lessons are in those experiences where we get maybe shocked out of our normal habitual way of living, which can be really painful, but ultimately can be incredibly transforming at times. And those things that we resist so much is often where our greatest lessons are, which on a soul level, I think there's being like a choice being made on a soul level, even if we're not aware of it. Yeah.
I remember as a child thinking about adults around me and not understanding why so many of them looked sad, and hearing about the stories of whatever they were sad about and thinking, my God, they're all going through lots of tragic situations. And it's only now, with the benefit of the wisdom that has grown through working with Matter in the last 10 years, that I can genuinely say that my own resistance towards suffering has begun to fall away, and I have a much better, broader understanding of it. But really, from childhood, many of us are seeing these things around us, and we are wondering, like is life an easy place to be in? Is it here for us to enjoy ourselves, or is it actually here for the best part for people to just get caught in the suffering?
Yeah.
A lot of people get stuck there, right?
Absolutely. There is a difference between getting stuck in part of it and not being able to use it as that fuel for transformation, right? Yeah. Yeah. What were you going to say, Neerava?
Well, I'm, just observing lately, particularly because there's lots going on for me to learn about, to have experiences around this topic. And also through my whole life, it seems that, it's one side of the pendulum swing or the other. It's people trapped in the suffering and wanting to continue to focus on it. And that's where the conversations revolve around. Supporting and sympathy rather than empathy, that whole thing. Or else the other side of, always talking about the silver lining and always talking about, but like just kind of glossing over. It's really amazing to watch how how challenging it is to navigate situations, and it's a tough thing to be in the center and watch both and let it be okay. We're not taught to do that.
Yeah.
So we're taught to either let's be positive, let's just gloss over, let's, focus on the good things about life or this person that you just lost, or a door, when a door closes, another one opens, but there's the grieving of the door that closed.
Right.
And so it seems to me that in my observations that we as human beings are taught to either focus on the closed door or pretend it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so as far as, the people around us, our loved ones, or it could be something going on out in the world, something happens, right? Tragedy. How we deal with that. Someone close to us is suffering. And I know that it's been a long process for me in understanding that, where earlier in my life, I was very much in that, what you call, I guess, codependency, where it was just, all I knew was fix it, try to help the person and fix it with wherever I was, whatever was going on, like the solutions in my mind, I would just try to help them fix it. And then, suffering myself from that need to control and interfere. And then also learning now, after all that, doing my own inner work and realizing all that suffering that I was trying to fix out there was actually inside me. But actually at the time, I had no idea that was happening. I was totally not aware of it, And so it does take time to become aware of those things about where am I fixing and where am I actually benefiting, helping the person from a big picture perspective, which is our intuition. What are you guys' experience in that?
Recently I had a wonderful teaching just from nature, and I don't think I know I've told you both about this, but I don't think I've talked about it on any of our videos. And it was two incidents with some birds that hit the glass. One the glass window, and then the other one hit the glass in the railing around the house. And the first time it was a beautiful hummingbird that hit the glass of the balcony railing and was laying on the deck, and I was observing it and watching it. And I felt this feeling inside, don't do anything, just watch. It's not for me to do. And after about 20 minutes or so, another hummingbird came along and sort of, poked at it on one side, poked at it on the other side, and then they both got up and flew off together and did this beautiful dance. And that I mean, I'm like really keeping it brief here. The experience I was having was really rich. And then the very next day, a robin flew into my bedroom window, and no other robins came close, but they were there. There was 6 other robins that were kind of there for hours. I observed on and off. I watched it for hours. And again, it didn't feel like it was mine to do. It was mine to watch and observe. And just watching the bird in its suffering and, coping through those hours and eventually moving off into the forest. And I don't know what happened to it. But watching inside how, especially the old me would have wanted to go out and rescue it, first of all, wrap it up in a blanket and do something, like as if that's really going to help. Because I don't want to see it suffer, right? I figure, well, if I can just wrap it in a blanket and love it, then it's going to be okay. And same with the hummingbird, just to watch that, just to be there and observe and be with it. And then something else came along, another hummingbird came along and gave it a little poke, and then off they go. And I just thought it was a wonderful teaching for me in life to just observe and feel like, what is mine to do? That life is always caring and, coaxing us in some way or another. And to really be aware inside of when it's when it's time to do something, or when it's time to just watch. And, you know, what's the lesson for me in every situation, you know, with the people around me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was a beautiful teaching. And then what came to mind this morning was, do you remember that movie? It was a Robin Williams movie where he was married and he had this wife that struggled with depression, and she ends up committing suicide. What Dreams May Come. Do you remember that movie?
I haven't watched it.
I don't think I've seen it.
The whole movie, he's trying to lift her up. This is my memory. Like, I can't remember the details, but my teaching that I remember from that movie is he's always trying to lift her up, you know, constantly poking at her like the hummingbird, right? Like, let's just, come on, let's go. We can do it. Let's be happy. We can get through life. And then eventually what happens is, they have this scene, it's kind of fantasy as well. There's this scene where she's in hell, and he realizes he has to go down there with her. Mm-hmm. And there's a moment where I realized, when I watched that movie, even though I didn't know what I know now, but there was something in it where I realized we need to be with people in their suffering. We don't need to, we shouldn't, like, it's that wanting to fix. But first of all, can we just sit there? Because there's something in it. If they're in our life and they're special and we feel to be there, can we just sit with them in their hell and feel it and watch it?
Yeah, and when we can't, that's also really great self-awareness, right? When internally it's like, I can't, you know, then we can know, okay, then I can work with that. Right? So it could help reflect, okay, what do I need to work with? And then we can focus on ourselves first until we're able to do that. But yeah.
As I'm hearing you say that, Neerava, about this film that I haven't watched, and the phrase that you just used, that he went into the hell, it made me think about, like, our journeys. Because we've had to go into our individual hells, whatever they look like, because we all showed up at the Dalian door for a reason. There was something not working in our lives. And at some point, we had the awareness that something needed to be done about it. But the needing to be done about it has basically been that. We've had to go into our individual hells and untangle the pieces that we believed in that proved not to be real. Mm-hmm. You know, like, it's a little bit like, I don't know, I mean, I've had this battle all my life, you know, am I the right shape or the wrong shape? And most of the time my brain's been saying I'm the wrong shape. But when you pull out an old photograph, if I've pulled out an old photograph of 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I look at it and go, oh my God, I was really good looking and I was really trim. But at the time, I believed something else. So there's a distance. And then as soon as that distance has arisen in time, I can see the truth of what that picture was showing rather than what I believed at the time. Mm-hmm. And that's what's been happening to us in our own sort of diving into our individual hells. There was something we believed in, which proves not to be true. Once we've been through the process of the Dalian Method, and then we can smile at it like I can at these old photographs of myself and say, oh, I've had this battle ongoing, right?
Yeah. And that's the distance we get from going through it, we first have to get really close to it.
Yes.
And then the distance comes when we go through.
That's right.
Experience.
But you can't come out the other end and say, okay, I'm now done with suffering, or I'm done with my personal hell. Every aspect that's arising in our life, if it's causing us to be triggered or upset in some way, all three of us now know, okay, take responsibility for it. What is this trying to teach me? What is the lesson behind this? Like, I had a mild back pain yesterday as a result of sitting in a meeting inappropriately. I knew that I was sat a little bit lopsided, and of course my back hurt afterwards. But in days gone by, the typical answer would have been, I'm in pain, go get a painkiller. Whereas now, that same thing, I'm in pain, automatically says, okay, there'll be a lesson in this pain. I wonder what my body's trying to show me, even though it arose as as a result of sitting in the wrong way, I still have the awareness that says there'll be some teaching in it now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing to remember, that like we have grown so much through our own experiences, and even the places that we would call hell or like the bottom, and how we can look back now and it's like, I don't see any other way. I had to go through that. I feel like I had to go through that pain and to get to a place to where it's like, okay, I'm really ready to go beyond it. Like Neerava, you said something about where people get attached to their pain. Mm-hmm. You know, we can form, and I definitely had that, where there's an identity around feeling, and I didn't know, wasn't aware that I had an identity around being a victim. And hoping someone, it was all unconscious, hoping someone would come in and save me. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know that there was an agenda behind having all these problems and getting myself into these situations, hoping someone else would rescue me. And if someone had rescued me every time, if people loved me the way I wanted them to love me, even though I didn't love myself, if I got all those things I wanted from people, I would be probably, I don't know where I would be. I would probably still be in that pattern, because I wouldn't have had to experience the pain of not getting what I wanted, not getting rescued, and still finding myself, in those like struggles. It wasn't, going away, and then I had to work through it. So my being in that pain and being identified with it was needed in order to finally let go and do the work and let go of the identification of that. And that always comes back to me when I see someone else that's suffering, and I feel like I want to fix it or something, or there's some idea that they might not be strong enough. And then I remember what I've been through, and it's like, well, why would I think they're not strong enough? Why would I assume that, So, yeah. And then would I be rescuing them from their learning if that's what needs to happen,
But I guess in that conversation also begs the question that you're not choosing to interfere. Do you still offer some guidance? Because we know that we've been helped.
Absolutely.
Dalian Method.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it ours to even mention that there's a way through it or out of it? Or like even that, like it's a delicate thing, isn't it? To know when to speak and say something, and when to just understand that this person is in suffering, but they're going to stay there, and there's nothing to be done, like you're saying, in terms of examples of the robins, right?
Yeah, and that's where we really have to. It's a process. I know it has been for me to listen to my intuition and kind of being aware, is this coming from fear or wanting to control the situation? And then if I feel like that's happening, then I need to go inside and try not to act on that, at least. And then sometimes it feels like, okay, don't hold back and express my truth about something I've experienced, that, not to do passive where I can't, like a rule that you can't interfere, because then that would become a conditioning that the mind is saying you can't say anything when the person's suffering, right? We don't want to fall into another conditioning. It's about awareness, right? Yeah.
And staying fluid to the moment.
Exactly. Which will call for who knows what in the moment, right? It could be anything. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess you're going through a lot of this as well, Neerava, right? With your mother, because most of the time I'm assuming that you're not feeling like you've got a solution as such to offer her right now. It's more just to be in her presence, I guess.
Yeah, it's a real it certainly calls for a lot of presence and listening inside, because there's immense suffering that she is experiencing, and I'm not trying to fix it, but yet I'm here with her, and there are sometimes things that I do that are helpful, and other times it's just to listen and let her be where she is. Last night was particularly challenging, but this is a person who for whatever reason, like I do trust in the flow of life and why things happen the way they do for people.
Mm.
And for my mother, you know, her husband died 5 months ago. You know, at the same time, she's dealing now with her own terminal diagnosis. She lost her brother this week, who was her rock, and he was there for her during her journey with my dad. And he even sat beside her at his funeral, and has, you know, been here for her diagnosis and everything. And it was a real shock. I'm really glad I was here. And then on top of all of that, she's losing her memory, and she knows it. And that's probably the most painful part right now. And to sit with somebody. So I have tried doing some Dalian Method with her.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's pretty challenging and tricky. And I don't at this point know whether it's the right thing for her. What I feel at times is just to ask the right questions, just to keep pointing her inside herself. You know, why is this happening? Or what do you think? She's got lots of big questions, and she has lots of pain and a lifetime of suppressing things because she didn't know any better. So it's all, you know, it's all here in her face all at once. And so why am I here? The question I keep asking myself is, you know, I'm part of this equation. I'm right here with her.
Yeah.
You know, why am I here? And I feel that movie came to mind this morning after a very intense night last night in the discussion with her. And just to be able to not try and fix it right now. This is a really intense time where that diamond that she is going under immense pressure. And can I sit with her here in this place and just watch it? And what's my learning? You know, I don't have the answers right now. I don't have her answers. I don't, and I'm not clear what I'm supposed to do other than to just keep breathing and watching. Most of the time I'm in deep compassion, but other times it does break my heart. So that's where I know there's a hook for me, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I'm recalling a moment where I remember talking to Madda about the fact that I had yet again been crying, and her phrase really struck me in my chest, like it was. She goes, "Kindi, there's nothing wrong with crying. Nothing wrong with crying at all. It's just that you've got to keep going until you get to the bottom of it."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I guess in some ways, like with what your mother's facing, by the time she's sort of like got to the bottom of the whirlwind that she's in, she's going to face the inevitable question, and that is about death.
Yeah.
And it's sort of in every direction for her right now. And
she's talking about it a lot about, you know, what's going to happen after she dies. And more about like, you know, why do I want to go on living at this point, you know, facing losing her memory, and she's recognizing all those things, but there's a lot of grief. But yeah, to get to the bottom of it, I don't know. I don't know if that's possible, when it's going to happen, if it's going to happen in this life. Like, I have no idea.
Yeah, well, if we think about Eckhart Tolle, remember that moment where like he's ready to commit suicide and he's just in the throes of almost about to, because life's too much. And then there's a separation. There's an immediate separation that he's not the mind that wants to commit suicide, that he's something else.
Yeah, there's a sudden experience.
Yeah, and that sudden experience took him out of the suffering instantly.
Yeah.
So we don't know what's possible for any of us.
It doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it's going to work but that's just one of possibility that,
Yeah. Like when we had our friend last week or the week before, when he went through his brain bleed, or what we thought was a brain bleed, and the stroke.
Or what we thought was a stroke.
Yeah, I mean, nobody was to know the profound experience he was going to have during that, because the label is, oh, it's a stroke, and possibly perceived as being suffering and bad and painful. And the same thing with Jandy when she had her accident.
I just want to explain a little bit. She's talking about a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, that was taken to the hospital for a stroke and is now at home and doing fine, and talked about how he had this amazing, beautiful experience where he's no longer afraid of death. And for him, that it's all been beautiful, even though the people around him were scared or worried at times.
Yeah. And the same thing happened with Jandy when she fell out of the balcony. She had a very expansive experience, and yet the family was in the, oh my God, this is awful. But yet inside, she was feeling huge. So even this, I think, helps us to see that when our brain understands something as being a bad situation, we don't know what the person's going through.
Yeah. And I've become aware of this recently in my life, so I'm not much into prayer, and a lot of us here, we're more like meditating and watching our breath, but some people use prayer, and that's fine. But whenever something happens, there's often praying for others. And this might sound a little controversial, but I've been feeling increasingly uncomfortable with praying for a certain outcome for another person, and really looking at that, even though I haven't been doing that myself. I understand where the wanting a certain outcome, of course, but think so, like putting our energy into hoping the person will heal or get this or get money or whatever is going to feel that fixes it. It bothers me because I think that often that comes from our own ego desires about what makes us feel good, even though I know on the surface it would seem altruistic and that's what everyone does and it's just so like socially acceptable. But if you go deeper with that, you know, like in that situation, if something's happened, do you really sit with what is really to that person's benefit? In the big picture, do we really know what's right for that person? And by praying or trying to like exert some kind of influence on the will of existence that this person shall be this, where are we coming from? Or, you know, and so I have been looking at that, and for me, I like to try to send that person strength and like get into my strength and my centeredness first, and then try to share it with them so that whatever they're going through, they can have more support and let existence and their soul decide, because it's not for me to, you know, and trusting existence or the soul or whatever you want to call it. That's been something that's evolved by working on my own pain over and over and seeing why it needed to happen. So I've learned that trust has grown over doing the inner work. So I know not everyone can relate to that trust when you're in fear, but it's just good to be aware and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an important topic, Leela, and I do feel the same as you, where it's impossible to know what is the right thing for their soul and their journey in any situation. So the outcome, I think it's important education that's needed in our world to help people realize that we don't know what's best for anyone. It doesn't matter how much we think we know somebody. It's impossible to know what the best outcome is for any challenging situation. So just to be with others and trust that life is unfolding as it needs to is the best gift we can give people, right?
Yeah, and to work through the places where we don't trust.
Yeah.
You know, to be honest with ourselves. And we don't need to judge where we want to control or judge, do that, but just to kind of recognize that there's something going on in us. And what you're going through is pretty incredible, because that brings up fear of death.
Yes.
Which is the greatest fear that we have. So that's,
That certainly happened for me too, though, when my husband was going through his cancer. And I was sort of in the support role that Neerava is in right now. I remember it definitely did bring up my own fear of death, even though it looked like it was the fear of him dying. But at the end of the day, the ego is always vested in its impact on itself. And I had several opportunities during that time to actually deal with my own fear of dying. Which we don't tend to look at. We think we're there as an empathizer for the person inside of us. We think that we're there for them when everything is affecting us in the same way as it's affecting them as well.
Yeah, and it's reinforced as love. And also that whole reinforcement, I mean, love has so much about it that is not really right. That is actually not true in the real sense of genuine compassion. But if you love someone, you'll suffer over them, or you'll cry over them, and you'll spend 10 years grieving over them. And how that's a sign that you're a good person and that you really love them. And I don't think that's true. I think that just means you're holding on, and that the grief hasn't been worked fully through. And it's nothing to do with the other person. It's actually only to do with ourselves. Yeah.
And our need, because they've left a void, and that void hasn't been filled, and it cannot be filled by anybody else. So it's the need that we have for their presence that drives a lot of our own individual suffering and so-called perceived love over the matter.
And that pain of what's left behind is the opportunity, right? To transform that into to fill it with our own self-love, or
And the bottom line is, it comes back to whether we're capable of facing our fear to be alone. Right? Along with the fear of death, there's also that other element, which is, can we face the fear of being self-sufficient, alone, taking care of ourselves, being responsible for everything that life sends in our direction, but knowing that it's for ours to deal with, not anybody else's that's going to hold us up and prop us up.
Yeah. And that's not exactly something that is encouraged in normal society from childhood. We don't see normal, the conditionings, everyone's acting from these fears. And I think children are so aware, but then they learn to fit in, and then they learn to be driven by fear. And then we have to kind of work through those things that we learned from the world, Yeah.
When we were in the workshop last weekend, Mara was talking about the home environment and how, a parent or parents have like their box, right? And then the kids need to be in the box, and she goes, and then the child goes out there, and the parents goes, "Come back, this is my box, it's a safe one, stay here. And then the child goes somewhere over there, and it's like, no, come back, this is the box, right? She was killing herself laughing as she was describing how everybody's got this little box, and they're trying to bring everybody back into it. And yet the universe is huge, right? There's no limit to it. And there's no need to be in these tiny little boxes that we create.
Yeah.
So you're reminding me of that conversation, because certainly that's what goes on in most home environments. It's like, I know, I'm the authority, and therefore I know, and my box looks like this. So stay in it. Yeah. We come to a natural end on this conversation about...
Well, is there something else we can add about witnessing suffering? Because we've already talked about, the main thing is to be aware of what's going on inside of us as we witness, because they're helping us too. Even though they're suffering, they're there for a reason, to show us, our own lessons. And that, is there anything else also? And also not rescuing people from fear, because we might be rescuing them from their own transformation and what they need to learn. And what do you guys, and I know you guys have,
I'd like to say
because
something.
You have children also. I feel like you have a deeper perspective, because I don't have children. So, yeah.
I mean, I'd like to add something about the types of things that create suffering.
Okay.
That are like, they're very subtle, but they exist in our world. Like, for example, the Cinderella story. So if we're reading the Cinderella story, and in many homes that is being read, somehow you're programmed to believe you're going to get rescued by a man. And it's sort of lurking in the background. And I was asking my youngest daughter yesterday, about dreams for the rest of your life. Like, what type of dreams do you have? And she smilingly says, well, it's about the partner. So part of it is about the partner, right? And so
She's 16.
She's 16, or she'll be 17 in a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So what that made me think about was how that's so tied in with my own idea of a dream. Like in a family, you're wanting this idyllic utopian partner, you're wanting these idyllic utopian children, and you want harmony. Like this is, I'm talking for myself, like I want harmony, and I want like the communication to be really open and authentic and honest and flowing, but it's all part of this sort of dream, that this sort of fantasy world can be created. And in many ways, we do know, those of us that have been working with the Dalian Method, we do know that that utopian sort of joyous, graceful, celebratory feeling is possible, and that we can respect each other in that way. But it does take two to tango in that. So each person has to take responsibility for their aspect of themselves.
That's good. Yeah, thanks for pointing that part out. Yeah, because we can only do our part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and also be mindful that we're not we're not deliberately stuck in suffering. So many things in society are created in a way that you fall into it. Like it's almost like quicksand, the world that we're in. And there's somewhere where we could fall here and somewhere where we could fall here, because it's created for us to sort of fall. So that once we've then had the fall, we'll find our way back out again. Mm-hmm. So it's a necessary part that we go through, and it can't be helped because of the unconsciousness that exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else, Neerava, that you want to add?
Oh, that just opened up a whole can of worms, I think. Another topic.
What about, because I know you have girls that a little bit older than Kindi's, but they're in their 20s, right?
Yeah, well, Kindi's oldest daughter is actually a year older than my oldest.
Oh, okay.
Mine will be 23 and 25. Oh, goodness, yeah. Well, there again, as their mother, I don't know what's best for them. I don't know what's important for their journey. I see them suffering. I have a tool that will transform what they're suffering with, and they're not using it. So I just continue to let go. And also, I've also learned to set a boundary where I'm not going to listen to the suffering anymore, because I've told them, I see where you are, I have compassion for you. They know that. But then also, you don't have to suffer like this. There's a loop that's happening. The ego wants to complain about this or that, or wants to be in this drama or that drama. So setting the boundary to not also continue to listen to the same things over and over is what I've had to do as a mom.
And that's where the stuckness gets, which is different than actually feeling our suffering and going through it, right? Which is actually an avoidance to feel it, really.
I have a lot of compassion for them. Young people these days, the whole mess around social media and what that creates, and it's, oh gosh, that's a whole nother topic. In fact, my younger daughter right now is writing a paper on the impact of social media on mental health. And, it's they have to deal with a lot. The whole world there's so much mental stimulation, and if active meditations were taught in school for them all these years, that would have been a real lifesaver to help deal with the mind and what it's being inundated with all the time. There's a lot of suffering there that doesn't need to be happening. But it is happening, so obviously it's there for a reason. And sort it out, they're strong souls.
And you're there as a great wake-up call to them, to show them there is another way. I mean, I get accused sometimes of, why can't you be normal? And normal means I'm supposed to sympathize with the tragedy and whatever drama has arisen, and say that somebody else is to blame, and to say that somebody else is the issue.
And somebody else is responsible for their anger.
That's right, yeah. And I have to come back to the same thing. I've got a choice here. I can either encourage you to become responsible for your own life, or I can encourage you to be a victim. And I know which one's going to serve you. So. if I've been through my own version of seeing myself as a victim and staying stuck in it for long enough, I really hope that they don't have to wait that long in some situations, right?
Yeah.
But my kids are a little bit luckier in the sense that they have been much more open to this work, and they've been much more open to including it into their lives. And so they don't go knee deep into things for too long. Eventually they go, okay, I think it's time to have a session. So I'm very fortunate to be able to see those benefits and to be able to see how much of a sort of potentially midlife crisis that they're avoiding, because it will come otherwise, but which is good, because when the crisis arises, it then will open up the doors for a person to go, okay, there's this tool and that tool and this, that, and the other, and this is how I'm going to help myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know everyone needs to suffer, and we still need to suffer at times, until we see whatever we need to see, until we, pick up the tool and use it. Or sometimes there's just, the aha moments happen in that intense suffering. And I do trust life and how it's unfolding for people. But
and respecting people to make their choice and live their own life, and I think that's one thing that's coming out of this discussion is what's the best thing we could do for people around us, or even the world at large, right? Consciousness, all this, it's our own work.
Yeah.
Always at the end of the day, it's our own work will have the most profound effect, and we'll be living our awareness and just having effects that we probably aren't even fully aware of, right? That we're living by example, and also not causing harm, right? By coming from fear and things like that.
So, but you can't cause harm the more conscious you become.
Exactly.
So that's a natural byproduct, and any harm that is being caused is only getting caused because the ego is involved.
Yeah, it becomes harder to do things like that as the more aware you become of these things.
Yeah, much tougher to get caught in things that are going to actually cause pain to others, unless you're coming from a place of awareness that says, a tie has to be cut because enough is enough. And that's still part of their ego. That's part of their evolution. And you're coming from a conscious space that says, this is what has to happen.
Absolutely. That's also important. Sometimes we need to go we need to go in a different direction.
But when you say that, Leela, when about being respectful, I think that's what it comes down to. There are so many of us on this planet, and we're not supposed to do everything the same way.
Exactly. We're supposed to participate in our unique contribution. And also, that same thing about not knowing what is the person learning through that, not just the lessons, right? There's gifts that come out of, and wisdom that come out from going through things. The experiences we have on this planet. And just want to mention this before we end, also the world's problems, right? It's like what's going on out in the world, and that can be another way to get the ego caught up in, I'm going to wake people up, or I'm going to, and sometimes we have to look at why we get behind a certain cause, and are we aware of our own woundedness or projections and things like this, or wanting to project it all on the bad guy and all that kind of thing. Or fixing the world's problems and trying to bring peace to the world when really we're just wanting it inside of ourselves. We're not at peace with ourselves. So,
and to see that what we're seeing in the world is actually it's the macro scale of seeing something outside that does exist in its micro form inside too. And when you get to the point of seeing it inside you, then it doesn't affect you when it's visible to you on the outside.
It doesn't affect us in that it won't drag us. It's a different effect. You can still be affected by it, but it's not like a drowning in it, right?
No, because you see it for what it is.
Because it's a reflection of our inner world, but also a reflection of the consciousness on the planet too, as well. So we can still see that these things are happening, and and it's painful, but it's not. I don't know how to explain it, but it's not by being completely detached, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't mean not feeling. It doesn't mean not feeling.
It's like the sadness might be there, or
we aren't that suffering. We're observing it and we're feeling it, but it's not who we are. It's an experience.
Yeah, there's a deeper trust even as we're feeling the sadness, I think.
Yeah.
And the mind still asks different interesting questions, like the example from yesterday when I heard about that bus with the hockey players that died together. And it was intriguing for me because my mind went to all of the family members first and how much suffering they will go through, and just the reflection that that's now going to be the way that they will evolve. Then it went to how these people left the planet together. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, was that some sort of a contract where they were all together and they needed to move on together? So I started posing questions like that in my mind. But they're the different types of questions that are arising now or different awarenesses that are arising to where we would have normally heard about 15 young people that have died together.
Mm-hmm. There's a more larger perspective that's kind of allowed.
Yeah, we don't know what the answers are to many of these things because, why did they all have to exit together in the way that they did? And was that all pre-chosen or not? Whatever.
Yeah.
But it would be nice if our news could share some good news as well.
Or at least not create more fear or sensationalism around it. But, we have to be, we choose to listen to it, right? Or not listen to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I tend not to watch it. I only hear about it third hand when it's already by somebody else, and then it gets shared with me. Yeah.
Same here. All right. Well, any last words?
Well, just in summary about, the topic of suffering and people suffering around us and our own suffering, it's that reminding ourselves that it's okay to grieve the closed door. It's okay to look for the open door. And they both have to happen at the same time. The same thing with, the birds that I mentioned at the beginning, being able to be with people in their suffering. Sometimes it's our job, sometimes it's not, to do something and to really check in inside, what's mine to do, and what's happening inside when we're observing the sufferings. There's a lot to continue to, because there's so much suffering in our world. It's definitely our opportunity day to day to watch inside our own selves.
And then allow for the joy and the other part of life as well when that comes.
Yeah.
It's like feeling all the aspects of our lives fully.
I remember the two things. There's the one thing on my whiteboard that was there for you. It's probably still there, but I don't live there anymore. This too shall pass. Remember, Mata always gave that. And the other one was everything that the Osho says and Mata says, everything in life should be celebrated. So having both of those awarenesses. And Mom and I danced yesterday. Just want to say.
Wow.
That's cool.
Nice.
So
those moments, yeah. Well,
I think what I'd like to say, Leela, is take your time. So every person has their own timing on the speed of their own evolution and how they process suffering. And there's no shortage of time. So we're on a journey, and we'll go at the pace that's relevant. And if you need to be in a certain state for longer, that just happens to be what you need to be in. Mm-hmm. So not to discount the beauty behind suffering and its purpose, and not to discount how long it takes you to actually get it. Like whatever it is that existence is you to get, it's all okay.
Yeah, the less we judge what we're going through, this so much better, right? The self-judgments. Yeah.
Because there's a danger in that conversation with what we're having, is that we're giving people the impression that suffering is a bad thing and then you've got to get out of it. Well, there's a purpose behind it, and there's a pace that is relevant to each person's journey.
And I think that's part of trusting life. It's like, I'm going through this, and this is what I'm going through, or this is what's happening, and that's part of life too, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Thank you.